Fantazis, and I'm the president of the high school's Principal Advisory Leadership Board. Tonight we are excited to provide our community with the opportunity to learn more about the candidates running for our board in the upcoming election.
Hi everyone, my name is Noe Zamora. I'm the Vice President of the Principal's Advisory Leadership Board. First of all, thank you all for being here. Tonight we've done a similar event to this the past 2 years so that we can get to know the candidates. And we're hoping that tonight's forum offers some insight into these candidates and what they hope to do if elected as Board of Education members.
We want to take a moment and thank all of the candidates for being here tonight. We value the time and commitment from each candidate. Before we begin this evening, we would like to share some ground rules. We ask that our candidates be mindful of the time for responses, which will be 1 minute and 30 seconds. We ask that you keep your answers relevant, and we ask that you be respectful of others. In addition to our expectations of our candidates, we do have some expectations for our lovely audience members as well. We ask that our audience be respectful, ask meaningful questions for the good of the MRH community, refrain from asking personal questions, and to keep all submitted questions open for all of the candidates. Audience members should have received a note card and pencil upon arrival to the theater. They can write questions throughout the event, and a PAL board member will come around and collect the questions and begin to compile them into categories. Remember that questions must be general in nature that all candidates can speak to, and they should not be specific to one candidate in particular. Also, even if your question is not asked tonight, we will send all of the submitted questions to all candidates so they may answer through their own platforms.
We would also like to highlight the ballot and the election itself. This year there are 3 seats open and each of them carry a 3-year term. When you cast your ballot on April 7th, you can vote for up to 3 of the candidates you'll hear from tonight.
So now we'll get started. We'll begin by asking each candidate to share a little bit of background information. So our first question for you candidates is, what motivated you to run for the school board? What values will guide your service on the board? And then if applicable, if you could include any children that you have in the district. We can start with Miss Lindsay.
Thank you so much. My name is Rachel Lindsay, and before I answer the question, I just wanted to thank Vera and Noe and the rest of the PAL board for the work that went into organizing this event. I think I've got a little bit of feedback. Does that sound okay to you all? Okay. All right, so to answer this question, I'm just going to introduce myself, and then as we talk more tonight, I think more will come out about my why. My name is Rachel Lindsay. I am going to talk really briefly about my personal, my professional, and my community service background that has all shaped why I'm running and what I hope to achieve as a board member. So I'm an MRH mom. We've lived in the district since 2013. I have 2 high school students, a freshman and a junior. In my professional life, I am an associate professor at St. Louis University. I have classroom and curriculum development experience as part of my professional life, as well as nonprofit leadership and budget oversight experience, both as a higher ed administrator and as a professor. And then I'm also motivated to run because of my commitment to MRH as a community. So when my kids were younger, I didn't often have a lot of time to donate or to volunteer, sorry. I'm a single parent, and the day-to-day was hard enough getting my kids to school. But as my kids got older and more independent, I've been able to volunteer more of my time in more committed ways. So I volunteer for Booster Club. I serve on the Equity and Action Advisory Council to the board, which evaluates and advises on the district's commitment to equity throughout, from classrooms to boardrooms.
Hi, I'm Christy Martinez. I guess to go a little bit into my background as well, I'm an educator and have been in education for 20 years. I'm very committed to educational equity. I'm a school psychologist. I've spent most of my career, I've been a gen ed teacher, a special ed teacher, and a school psychologist. I've spent most of my career in remote Alaska on a Native American reservation in North Dakota and then in North County. So I have worked with a lot of students that socioeconomically were not advantaged. I have a firm belief that all students should have access to a high-quality education regardless of obstacles that they may face. And so that prompted my drive to run for school board. I was previously on the school board from 2023 to 2025, and during that time I had some concerns regarding teacher turnover and teacher recruitment. Those concerns I still have, and so it prompted me to run again. I do have two sons, Spencer and Isaac Martinez. They both are graduates of MRH. I am actually from a small, it's grown a lot, but town about an hour and a half outside of St. Louis called Farmington. But I moved to Richmond Heights where my husband was born and raised about 10 years ago, and I've been here ever since. And like I said, two sons, they both graduated 21 and 24, 2021 and 2024. But ultimately, my goal for running for school board is because I do have a belief that all students deserve access to a high quality education, regardless, like I said, of obstacles that they face.
My name is Loretta Colvin, and I am currently on the Board of Education, and so I'd be running to continue my seat in this election. What motivated me to run, or to get involved, I think I should say, because I was appointed this summer, was I started getting involved a few years ago as I saw us losing teachers. For me, it was at the high school level where my kids were students, and that caught my attention. These were teachers that had made an important impact for my kids, and I was concerned to see them leave and go to other districts. So that got me involved, but at the time I was still working on my doctorate, so I was involved from the background. I've now graduated, and so I could step up to become a more active volunteer. And so I'm currently on the board. I'm also have leadership experience at MRH in other areas, including on the boards of Joe's Place, of the speech and debate and mock trial boosters, and also I worked with Prop B and E. My values that I bring to the board, mostly I'm a supporter of public education. I would not be here without public education. I was raised in an impoverished single-parent household, facing a lot of barriers to educational success, but thankfully I had great teachers that supported me along the way. They pushed me and they got me prepared to attend Mizzou as a first-generation college student with both scholarship and grants that supported me through. And now I work as a nurse practitioner. I have two children that have attended MRH. One is now a freshman at WashU, and the other is a high school junior, and they both started at the ECC.
I'm Brittany Shattuck. I have two kids in the district. My oldest daughter, Sajess, is a sophomore at the high school, and my youngest daughter, Lucy, is in first grade at the ECC. I'm an adoptive mom. I have a multiracial family, and that's one of the reasons that I'm running. It's very important to me that all of our kids, regardless of their background and where they come from, have an amazing free and public education available to them. MRH is super special and wonderful with our phenomenal teachers, our metaphor models, and so many fantastic programs that we have. And one of my values is to run and preserve that hands-on and effective learning that we are so well known for. Another reason that I'm running is to be a good steward of our tax dollars. We're going to have to make some tough decisions over the next few years, and I want to preserve what is most meaningful to us as we look towards the future. And then my third value is creating a safe and supportive environment for all of our teachers, and for our students, making sure our teachers know that we have their backs on the board and we are going to stand by them despite any federal pressure, and that our students know that they have a safe and supportive environment to be in. My district experience, I have served on the For Our People Advisory Committee for the past 3 years. I'm a Girl Scout troop leader for Lucy's troop for the past 2 years. I am now on the Equity and Action Committee, and then I also taught a We Stories cohort at the ECC last year to help families talk with their young kids about race.
Hello, my name is Lauren Widmer-Tiefenbrunn. For the sake of questions and answers, you can call me Lauren Widmer. That's what I go by professionally. I am a mom of 2 wonderful kids. I have a daughter in 6th grade and a son in 3rd grade. My husband and I have lived in the district since 2012. We moved here from Webster for the schools, much to my mother's horror at the time, but she consistently agreed that I was right on my assumptions before moving. I was motivated to run for school board because I have dedicated my life to public education, and it was time to take the skills that I learned in my professional life and apply them to the community that I love. So I was a classroom teacher for at-risk high school kids for 9 years. I was a building administrator and program administrator for 4 years for alternative programming. And I now work at central office in a neighboring district doing student support services K through 12. And I have a doctorate in education leadership. And in a time when public education is not being fully supported at the federal level, at the state level, in the media, I think it is time and very important to have experienced leadership on the school board, not to make radical changes, but to ensure that we have a strong foundation and that we can continue to move forward as a community, steadfast, collaboratively, together, empathetically, because that's why we're here. That's why we stay here. That's why some of us moved here. So that's what motivated me. It was the time to apply the skill set, and I look forward to the opportunity.
Thank you guys so much for telling us about yourselves. Could you give us any skills, experiences, or strengths that you bring to the table?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. So skills I've been in education for 20 years. I've been a teacher, a gen ed teacher, a special education teacher, and a school psychologist. So I do have an education background. I also have experience being on the school board from 2023 to 2025. I served on the school board. Sorry, I didn't hear the question, so I'm just looking. I do think that I'm a team player. I'm good at working with others in a professional setting. In my job, there are teams of people that I work with on a daily basis that we may have differing opinions, but we're able to come to the table and kind of compromise and work through things. So I think that I do have the communication skills to be effective in my role on the school board. I think that those skills kind of set me up to hit the ground running on the school board.
Some of the skills that I bring to this role are trying to listen to different viewpoints. That's actually much of my day because I see patients as a nurse practitioner, so I'm hearing what brought them in. For those of you that know, a lot of what I do is work with CPAP, which is not everyone's favorite thing to consider. And so a lot of what I do is hear what is important to them, try to meet in the middle of what their hesitations are, what I'm trying to help them accomplish for their health and well-being. And so I use a lot of communication skills throughout the day and bring that to the board as well. In terms of experience, I have a lot of leadership and volunteer experience, both within MRH and beyond. I mentioned earlier my leadership within MRH. For the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, I have been a committee chair and a educational course chair. As a volunteer, I currently serve on the For Our Community Committee and also as a judge for speech and debate, which just gives me a little bit of a sense of what's going on in the community. And my strengths are I've been in a lot of different places within the district, seen a lot of different things. I'm on the board already. I finished my 18.5 hours of training with the MSBA, which is no small feat, but gives you a lot of background to bring back to the role when returning to continue your seat.
I think I bring a unique perspective from almost all of the levels of public education. As a parent, as a teacher, as a building administrator, I work at central office. One of the primary roles of a board member is that we employ one person, that is the superintendent. I do have superintendent credentialing, so I think it's important to have that insight on all levels of the school system. Within my professional role, I help onboard school board members to district policies and procedures. Those are very similar from district to district because, Afton and Maplewood MRH are in the MSBA cohort. I have been a member of the NEA executive board in a different district. So I know what it's like to work with teachers who need additional support. I'm part of new teacher orientation professionally. And so I think bringing that comprehensive view and inside understanding can bring just a wealth of knowledge to the board. And when we are trying to collaborate on new and exciting ventures, when we are trying to work through tough conversations in closed session, I think not trying to learn the job while doing it, not trying to build the plane while flying it, can bring a lot of stability and effectiveness to a collaborative board. And I think another really important skill set is that I've spent my professional life collaborating with those most in need to get their needs met. So I'm a good collaborator and creative problem solver.
I am a former classroom teacher as well. So I taught kindergarten here in the St. Louis area before moving to Japan to teach English for a year. So that's something that I'm bringing, is that multicultural experience and that experience of living in a different country, not speaking the language, knowing what that's like and how hard that can be. Then I returned to the United States and taught kindergarten and first grade in a charter school in St. Louis City for a few years, and that was an eye-opening experience as well, with tons of lessons learned about how important funding is, particularly funding our local community schools. It made me vehemently anti-charter, and it's a huge part of why I'm so passionate about our local public schools. Now I am leading a team in the tech world, so once I left teaching, I started doing instructional design and have moved through various companies, and now I lead a team of instructional designers. And in that role, I am responsible for setting all of our strategic planning, our entire roadmap for our customer education team. I oversee performance. I mediate conflict between my very big personality direct reports, work to get to that shared common goal of educating our customers. And there's a lot of overlap in that and the skills that I'll bring to the board of mediating those differing opinions, working with people that are all sharing the same values and the same goals, in this case that we love our kids, and in that case that we want to educate our customers, and moving forward with that. So, thank you.
This is just wonderful to be on a panel of people who are also committed to education and have such rich histories. My credentials are, or my qualifications, I think, experiences, sorry, again, I couldn't see. I am currently an associate professor at St. Louis University, where I've taught since 2016. I have ongoing classroom experience, designing both my own classes and working to develop curricula at the departmental and college level, and serving on university committees as well. I am the past president of a professional society, so I have experience with bringing together a lot of people with a lot of different ideas about how to move an idea, a group, a profession, a community forward, and to collaborate with those individuals towards a common purpose. Before I got to SLU, I was the associate director of a center at WashU, where I had, among my portfolio responsibilities, were to oversee a multi-million-dollar, not oversee, but collaborate on the oversight of a multi-million-dollar budget, and to implement curricula, not only at the level of my classrooms, my department's classrooms, but within the broader ecosystem of the university and and higher education in general. And I think that having that, both that classroom experience, ongoing classroom experience, it's the fourth quarter, we are all exhausted, teachers can affirm this, but also the sort of 30,000 feet. What is it to be an educator in the US today, at a time when public education and education generally is under threat from a variety of different directions?
Thank you so much.
All right, it's time to get into the questions that were compiled from a survey that was sent out over the past few weeks, as well as some questions that the PAL board came up with. We will present each question on the screen. We will ask the question, and then each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer. If you go over in time, as you've been seeing, our lovely timekeeper Zazie will hold up a card with time written on it. We ask that you finish the sentence and stop so the next candidate can begin. We will start with a different candidate each time, and then we'll proceed down the line to make everything nice and fair.
All right, so Maplewood Richmond Heights schools are incredibly diverse. As a member of the board, how do you plan to support and advocate for all students, including those from marginalized communities?
So the reason we moved here was the diversity of the district, and I am very pleased that my kids have been exposed to a microcosm of what real life is like in the workplace, in society, and it's been a great experience for them. From the board level, we have really had a great foundation built by Dr. Jameson and her team in understanding where there were gaps to be filled, where we needed resources. And so from the board level, I would like to continue the momentum that she has built in supporting our schools, in helping our learners in a diverse environment with diverse backgrounds. And part of that also is hearing from the Equity in Action Committee. It's a relatively new committee. They haven't had a chance to share findings with the board yet. And I look forward to getting information from that committee to help the board understand the perspective of teachers and staff within the district, administrators within the district, and stakeholders within the community so that they can help guide our policies and our priorities in decision making.
So MRH should be a place where belonging is a right, not a privilege. And as the board, it is our job to set the policies and then trust our teachers to enact them and keep our students feeling safe and supported in the classroom. Our teachers can only do that against the federal and state concerns if they know that the board has their back and the board is there to ensure that they can call students by their preferred names and pronouns. They can teach accurate and real history in their classroom without fear of penalization from the state level. And the board is there to ensure that that happens. Ensuring that our students feel welcome and supported is a key part of my platform, and it's something that I act out in my real life. As I mentioned, I'm on the Equity in Action Committee, and we've had 2 meetings so far. Already we're having some really interesting conversations and discussions about data and how we can close the gap for our students. We've made tremendous progress, but there's still so much work to do on closing that achievement gap for our diverse learners. And that includes socioeconomic diversity, students with 504 and IEP plans, and our students of color and of different backgrounds. So, as I mentioned, my goal as a board member is to ensure that we are holding the district accountable for upholding those policies and really standing by our teachers to make sure that that happens. And when we notice that it's not happening, that should be considered an emergency intervention.
So this is a place where I think my doctoral research really comes into play. I did my research on improving sense of belonging among minority students in predominantly white schools. And the research is overwhelmingly that you have to not only invite people to the table, but you have to very intentionally include voices and elevate. That the path to belonging is opportunities for advocacy, helping all individuals of the community feeling like they actually have the capacity to affect positive change on their own lives. That is students, that is parents, that is staff. And the way to do that, again, is to, as board members, continuously seek out those voices that are not coming to the table already, and making sure that we are looking through an equity lens when looking at adopting resources, when looking at making budgetary decisions, when looking at what professional learning do our teachers, do our leaders, do our support staff members need, so that we can again, not only include, but listen and hear and elevate and ensure that all voices are not only heard, but truly valued and reflected in the culture of our district.
I think that we do a disservice to the district when we reduce diversity to a single definition. I think that our kids are reflective of a much broader range of diversity than current policies reflect. Like other panelists up here, absolutely thinking about how we close achievement gaps based on gender or sexuality or race or income, access to resources, all of those things. But as a board member, I would want to make sure that our conversations around diversity stretch from classrooms to the boardroom itself and into the wider community. Our current board, I don't think represents the full range of diversity in our community. And you have 5 more white ladies with advanced degrees up here. So I don't know how much more diversity we will bring in that sense, but I think we each do bring a lot to the table from our experience. I think that our kids have a much better sense of what it is to live in a diverse community than many of us do. And it's just part of their life, right? And not just racial diversity. Economic diversity is huge in our district right now. If we look at the per capita income over the last 10 years, Maplewood and Richmond Heights have both changed dramatically. I think that we look at housing affordability, and we also look at housing situations. More than half of our residents rent their homes, and that affects how they are interacting with the district, where they see themselves reflected in district policies. And so, yes, as an educator, I am going to be on the side of teachers, always a champion for their own protection in the classroom to teach the subjects that they need to teach without interference from outside entities, but also working every month, every meeting, every conversation to include voices, not only in our classrooms, but in our policy-making decisions as well.
I will say I was very fortunate in my first term to work on a school board with several really wonderful board directors who advocated fiercely for our students. And they generated a resolution for our students who identify as LGBTQIA+. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to vote on that. I can't take credit for creating the resolution, but I was fortunate that I got to participate in the voting on that. And it is near and dear to my heart. I think I couldn't agree with Dr. Lindsay Moore that diversity comes in all kinds. You know, it's not just a race issue, it's socioeconomic, it's ability. There are several types of diversity. And, you know, my goal is that we keep this momentum going, that with the resolution that the board passed, that we keep that momentum moving forward. And so all kids find that they are welcome and wanted and supported in the MRH community.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing the school district, and how would you propose to address them if elected as a member of the board? We can begin with Ms. Shattuck.
I think we have several key things at the top of mind right now, but one thing that's going to be facing the board is we are nearing the end of our current strategic plan. And so that is going to be a key focus over the next several years as we look at measuring how much have we achieved in our strategic plan for our people, for our kids, for our community, for our teachers. And where do we want to change and make adjustments in the future strategic plan? That's going to happen during the term of anyone who's sitting here today. Will be making the new strategic plan. So that's a key focus. Another key focus is that we are facing those pressures from the state and federal level. That's going to impact our budget. That's going to impact the way that we engage with our teachers and our curriculum and how we have to stand up for them and support what we believe in as a district, even if there are monetary consequences. And then I also think that one of the key things is going to be protecting our metaphor models. Those are incredibly valued people to our district. It's what makes us special. That hands-on learning is crucial and key, and expanding those programs is going to be something that we should examine. How can we expand our social emotional learning? How can we grow our seat to table program? How can we connect with the community and give students that experience in hands-on learning that really prepares them for the world that they're going to be going in? I anticipate this question is going to come up later, so I won't touch on it, but I also think that technology is a huge factor, and I'll touch on that later.
So continuing off of what Ms. Shattuck said about continuing with metaphors, I think in the state of Missouri, we're looking at a new accountability system where school districts are going to be ranked by letter grade. And a lot of the proposals currently on the table have a continuous improvement requirement, so that as soon as 65% of the districts in the state hit a certain threshold, the bar moves higher and we have to keep pushing forward. And I think that the challenge is, how do we continue to move the bar forward? How do we continue to push forward when we are losing support potentially from the lack of title funding? The Federal Department of Education that oversees things like 504 support, that is potentially under attack. So as a district, how do we ensure that our internal practices, procedures, systems are tight so that we can continue to offer high quality education to all of our students? I think one of the solutions that's kind of already on the table as far as how do we continue to push forward in that innovative space is our participation in the Success Ready Student Network. That is a focus on competency-based learning, a shift to not only proficiency scales or competency-based learning, but also market value assets at the high school level, so students are leaving high school better prepared for life after high school. Collaborating with partner districts to ensure that our students have access to internships and apprenticeships, and having grant funding tied to that so that we can effectively train our staff and get our families involved to support holistically, again, on the design for learning that we've had as a district for over a decade.
Challenges and sorry, again, I can't see the question, so I'm just reminding myself what I'm responding to here. State and federal funding amount to just a fraction of what our school budget operates from year to year as of now. Those formulas, as you may know, are under revision, perhaps. There are a number of bills in the Missouri legislature that would affect how individual school districts are funded. Some of you might have heard about open enrollment, where taxpayer funding would follow a student instead of being put directly into the school, the local public school. So those are big challenges. None of us have a crystal ball. We can't see the future of this legislative term, let alone over the next 3 years. But I think we have to be intentional about our educational values. Are we going to chase parity with other districts that have different student bodies? Absolutely. We want to play the game of the public school system in Missouri. But we also need to evaluate what our priorities are. The metaphor model, especially at the high school level, is a place that needs our attention. Placement in college and in career are guiding principles there. But also, how do our students use the metaphor of apprenticeship to give back to their community? I've heard a lot from a lot of people recently about potential partnerships between our high school students and our seniors who are trying to age in place. I think that's an incredible opportunity for our metaphor model to expand beyond our classrooms and into communities, into our community in ways that need, that will help us survive the challenges that we face ahead.
I think there are several challenges facing education in general, that are on the horizon. One of the things that I think is especially concerning is the looming threat always of funding being taken away. I think, when we talk about funding being reduced, we talk about increased workloads. We know that just through the news and just through statistics, less and less people are choosing education and teaching as a career to get into. And so what happens is that it drives up the workload, creating teacher burnout. Not just teachers, but all educators. And so I think that we have to be very cognizant about how we treat our staff and how we go about doing our day-to-day operations, just because I think that increased workload and not necessarily always getting compensated equitably for the amount of work that's getting put into it creates challenges among our staff and just ultimately in our district.
I think for me, the biggest challenge is funding, because that drives so much of what we do. A large amount of our spending is fixed on salaries and benefits, on maintaining our schools and maintaining certain programs that are requirements. And so there's not a lot of places where we get to make adjustments. So we have to be very careful and wise in hearing from our administrators what their recommendations are, asking tough questions to better understand, to help educate the community also who's not following the budget as closely, to understand some of our tough decisions that we may make as the state threatens funding, feds threaten funding, and we even have difficulties locally because there's a limit on how much we can draw from our local tax base, and it may not keep pace with inflation. So I'm glad that there have been efforts already on the board to consider that in terms of developing maintenance plans. So we have a rainy day fund to be maintaining our buildings and to help us better buffer against inflation and rising costs of materials and labor. And I'm glad that we're working towards keeping our fund balance in a place where it can help us on a rainy day to weather the challenges that we see ahead, and so that we can maintain our resources, and particularly our resources that support our teachers and our staff.
All right, thank you. So you guys all brought up that funding is a pretty big challenge. So what will you do to be a good, responsible steward of our district's budget? And if faced with limited resources, how would you decide where to invest time, funding, or staffing to best support students with the greatest needs? Starting with Dr. Widmer.
I couldn't hear whose name you said. So in terms of being faced with limited resources in public education, that has always been the status quo. That is, public education has never been a cornucopia of funding. So I think working in public education, it is always about the tough choices as far as how to invest time, funding, or staffing to best support students with the greatest needs. I think to make that decision, we need good, reliable, valid, clear data. So that we are not just going by what feels good, what our gut tells us, but we are making informed decisions on quantitative and qualitative data so that we can then invest time, money, and resources into things that we can then measure. Did we get a good return on investment for our students, for our families, for our taxpayers that don't have kids in the school district? So that might sound like a non-answer. What are the things that I'm going to make the tough call on? If you need a clear answer, I believe that teachers are our frontline workers. They spend the most time with our students of anybody else in the community, sometimes more than their parents on a weekday. And so, again, I think it comes down to, do we have effective data? Do we know where to look for it? Do we know the tough questions to ask? Do we know who to bring to the table to have that tough dialogue about what we are going to do, when, where, and why? And then I think it's also really important to have the strength to stand as a board and be able to tell our community why we made the decisions that we did, because ultimately we would be the 7 accountable to our community.
Board of Education is empowered by the state to approve budgets, not to create budgets. And so I think that we start with trusting the people who are on the ground, the day-to-day, building principals, central office personnel who oversee things like operations. trusting that they have done their work, they've looked at the data, and they are bringing a responsible budget to the board for approval. Obviously, part of the approval process is to make sure that everything is lined up with district values, with expectations for student learning, to support teachers. I think Ms. Colvin said earlier that the majority of our budget, and she would know this number better than I do, but by far the biggest budget line is personnel salaries and overall personnel expenses. So thinking about how we prioritize classrooms, how we support teachers from classrooms to contracts is a huge part of what it is to be on the Board of Education. And then also accountability. One example of this could be, and I'm going to take an example that I've been thinking through the last week or so. This fiscal year, the approved budget for legal services by the Board of Education was $45,000. To date, we've incurred costs more than $160,000. And I have yet to hear from our Board of Education where those funds are coming from, what is at risk of being cut, if our legal services costs are going to keep ballooning. Next year, we are already projected for a budget shortfall in the best funding scenarios. So yes, expenditures are outpacing revenue. That's the way these things go. But the board needs to be transparent in how they're spending, how money is being spent once the budget is approved.
I'd want to make sure that all of our expenditures align with our educational goals, which ideally are informed by all stakeholders. So that's the first thing that, for me, as a responsible steward of our district's finances. When we talk about the limited resources, I think, again, the stakeholders kind of have a say, or should have a say, in what the priorities within the budget are. For me, personally, on a personal note, I think teacher salaries and staff salaries are definitely paramount, along with our innovative programs, to make sure that all students are able to access those programs, regardless of their socioeconomic status. And then, of course, the safety and security of our students and staff is paramount. And when I say that, I don't only mean the physical safety and security, but also the mental health piece. We know that is obviously something that, especially post-COVID, has become a serious challenge. And so those things, to me, are definitely priorities.
When looking specifically at the financial stewardship, I think it's important for a board member to ask questions to better understand the budget. Sometimes it can feel like a lot of information because it is a large budget. To the community, it can feel overwhelming. So trying to get information presented in a way that helps the community also see what the priorities are, where there are opportunities for savings, but also see how things have to course correct throughout the year, and receiving that information back as certain budgets do not go as according to plan. Where are the other opportunities to be able to move resources to compensate for that? And so I think really it's just the asking questions and trying to clarify, both as a board member and for the benefit of the community. And one of the things that I think is always helpful is to understand, as we see an increase in spending, understanding a little more of where that's coming from. I had a great conversation when I was canvassing door to door with someone who had very specific questions about some of the areas of our cost and how that has changed over time. They were really paying attention, despite not having kids in the district, but they wanted to really know where their tax dollars were going. And so it was a good reminder of what is important to the voters in our community to better understand how we are shepherding those resources.
Our budget is a moral document, and you as community members have trusted our district with your tax dollars. And how we decide to spend those tax dollars through our budget shows what we value most. So as we are making those decisions about where we're going to have to make tough cuts or where we want to invest more spending, it's crucial that we are thinking about who is most impacted by these decisions, who are we not considering when we're making decisions, and who is being left out. The district has several equity questions that guide them through some of these decisions, and those need to be central to those conversations. As far as being responsible stewards of those tax dollars, there are so many opportunities for us to continue to partner with community programs. Tonight, my daughter is at the Community Unity Center so that my husband could be here, and looking for programs like that that can help support the community, invest in ways that this budget might not be able to stretch to. I'm also thinking about the grant that you penned, and Noe got a grant passed that got us electric buses, and that is an amazing opportunity as well. So looking for opportunities for grants, looking to where we can stretch those tax dollars so that we don't have to make as many tough decisions. I've also already spoken to the value of hands-on learning and protecting our metaphors. That's something I'm committed to making sure our spending is invested in, as well as our teachers and educational support staff or educational support professional salaries as we are looking at their needs, because they're the heart of our classroom, they're the heart of our schools, they're who our kids are spending time with, and we need to invest in them so that they can invest in our kids.
Thank you all so much. The district has achieved remarkable academic success in previous years, with our annual performance report scores climbing dramatically from 77% in 2022 to a state high of 98.5% today. If elected, what specific actions will you take in collaboration with the superintendent and district leadership to ensure academic excellence is not only maintained, but built upon? How will you measure the long-term sustainability of these results? Dr. Lindsay, we can begin with you.
So acknowledging recent success, building on that. Is that?
Yes, academic success, ensuring it, building upon
okay,
it,
excellent.
measuring.
Excellent. I think that we have a lot to celebrate in our district. Lots of different achievements, ways of measuring academic success. The metaphors, the school metaphors have been brought up a lot tonight. There are ways that we can prioritize those moving forward. But I think that there are also real, tangible things that we need to do to make sure that the reporting that we have, that the ways that we measure academic success do not inadvertently exclude different paces of progress. So whether your kid is in E4 or on an IEP or both or neither, ensuring that our teachers are equipped with the resources they need to teach your kid in the ways in which they will excel. I think that at the high school level, we can do a lot to bring more advanced courses into our school building, more AP, more dual credit, instead of requiring students who want to take those more challenging classes to enroll in community college concurrently or other kinds of programs. I also think that we need to take seriously vocational training, and not only as something that we outsource to South Tech, but something that we bring back into our classrooms so that all students have real life skills as well as academic skills when they graduate.
I agree. I think, we did really great on the APR. There's no mistaking that. But I do think that there is also progress that isn't always measured on that particular, on the APR report. students, we saw that while students were making growth, our student groups didn't make as much growth as our white students. And so looking at that, I think when we are measuring success, I think it is important to look at those measures because, like I said, we did do a great job. But I think there are other areas where we can look at measuring success. If a student is meeting IEP goals, it may not be reflected on the APR, but that doesn't mean we aren't making progress. And so I think we need to expand what we're looking at when we're talking about progress being made. And I think that it may not always be reflected on the report, but I think that we are doing great things, and I think if we look in the right places, we're going to see that in other places as well.
To maintain our momentum, I think it is essential to support our teachers, to keep our high-quality teachers with experience, to recruit experienced teachers so that we can support academic excellence. The APR is one way of measuring this, a state-recognized way, but it is also important to look at other measures ongoing throughout the year that are used to assess our student growth, and measures that are recommended to us by administration to better understand where our gaps are and where our student needs are, so that we can then understand where resources need to be prioritized. In terms of measuring it, we have a number of measures in place, and having that information come to the board, presented in a manner that's also understandable to the community, I think is important, so we all can understand where we're at, where we're going, and how we, both as a community and as a board, can support our teachers and administrators in continuing to do great work.
As others have said, we have so much to be proud of in this district. It's clear that we are making progress. Our data shows that across the board, we're up and to the right, and that is exciting. But we also have to look at which students are falling through the cracks and ensure that we're supporting them. So making sure that we are examining our data in different ways so that we can identify those gaps that we might otherwise not have seen, and using that to inform decisions that we make about how we adjust not only our curriculum, but how we adjust how we measure moving forward. We have some new curriculum. I know at the ECC they're implementing a lot of new curriculum, and I'm so excited about that. One of the things that has been really valuable for me is hearing the principals' updates each month or I think it's monthly, quarterly perhaps? Quarterly, thank you. At the board meetings, which gives me an indication of what other things are happening, that data, like attendance data, how our adoption is, how our climate and culture is, those data points are also valuable, and they are inputs that we get on an ongoing basis before waiting for those lagging indicators at the end of the year. I also think that other ways to measure our success is how we're preparing students for the real world. So again, continuing with that hands-on learning, ensuring that we are evaluating our curriculum and making sure that we are meeting students' interests and their needs, and that when they leave our high school, they're prepared for whatever area they're going in, whether that's a trade school, a college, going into the career world right away, and ensuring that they have the support that they need in order to do that.
Yes, and something that the district is already doing that I find really, really exciting is the district is in year number 3 of something called the Innovation Waiver, which means that we have been partnering with districts from across the state to collaborate with the Department of Education to apply for a waiver from the federal government of traditional accountability standards, specifically MAP testing and EOC testing. So our APR score is fantastic. That is a one-time test. Sometimes we don't get those test results in classrooms until the next school year. That is essentially autopsy data, meaning it's after the fact. You can't make any live decisions with it to help improve instruction for students. So being part of that waiver means that we now would potentially get to use our through-year assessment data, our STAR testing, our NWE testing. The data that our teachers are already using to improve instruction in the classroom could now be used for our accountability at the state level. That is measuring not only status of student performance, but also growth, and breaking it down for all of our subgroups of students. It also allows us to provide a narrative, a descriptive dashboard, so that we can tell our own story. We are not beholden to just our subgroups, but we can explain to Christy's point, like, These are the students that maybe didn't hit that adequacy target or that target of status, but these are the progress goals that a bulk of our students are meeting. And I think in a district like MRH, where we pride ourselves on our uniqueness and our innovativeness, that being able to describe that is really important. And as far as how to collaborate on that, this is work that I already get to collaborate with Dr. McGee on, and I also already get to collaborate with Mr. Estrada on ensuring our students' mental health and well-being, because if you do not have your mental health needs met and you are not a whole student who is being taken care of, you are not going to come to class prepared to do your best academically. So I think that's a holistic approach that the district needs to continue to take with students, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate to tell our story in our own unique way.
Amazing, thank you guys. So we want to ensure cohesion among all board members and district administration. If elected, how do you plan to work collaboratively with these stakeholders to achieve our common goals? Starting with Dr. Martinez.
So luckily, in this particular scenario, I have worked with most of the board members previously because of my time on the board, and it was an excellent experience. But anytime you have 7 different people with different opinions and different personalities, it takes collaboration, collaborative goal setting, constant communication, being open and transparent. I think it requires a lot on the part of working together and building a rapport and building a relationship. I think, luckily, like I said, I have worked with the people that are currently on the board in the past, and it was a great experience. And so I think I could hit the ground running should I be elected. But I think it definitely takes a lot of work, and getting to know each other and each other's kind of idiosyncrasies. But I think I would hit the ground running with that.
Well, for me, on the board, I know 3 members already very well who would be continuing, that their seats are not up for election. And I have known them in the past too, so I know, I'm going to call it passions, not idiosyncrasies, just to make us look a little better. But everyone has a different focus, has a different background that explains a little bit of their focus and interest. And the nice thing is we have a lot of variety of backgrounds and talents that come to the board that makes the board a stronger body in decision making. And we have some structures in place that allow us to work well with administration. One of the ones I really appreciated as a new board member was being able to ask questions prior to the board meeting when things needed clarification for me, and also reading other people's questions to then be able to see the responses and have a little more information headed into the board meeting, because there's a lot to digest before a board meeting. The board meetings themselves, I really appreciate the collaboration with the administration and leaders that present information to us and answer our questions openly and with very helpful insight. And one thing that I would like to try to bolster would be hearing more from the teacher's perspective. I think there's been some times where we have been able to get that perspective to the board in our decision making, and I really have appreciated hearing how something implemented that we're deciding on would affect them directly.
The board is made up of 7 members for a reason. We want to have 7 different experiences and 7 different backgrounds represented because it helps us look at things from different ways and different perspectives. And because of that, we're not always going to agree on everything. I've had some conversations, actually on Sunday at a living room meet and greet, someone asked me this exact question because they've noticed that at times board meetings can get heated. And that's because people are here because they're passionate and they want what's best for our kids. What's important, though, as a board member is that when those tensions arise and when we do feel very passionate about something, it is important that we reflect how to interact with people that we disagree with or people that maybe we do agree with, but we still want to explore all sides of a discussion. I had the opportunity to attend the Restorative Practices Community Conversation, and Dr. Stansel was there and said something that I've been thinking about for weeks, which is that we can't hold our kids in our schools to a standard that we're not willing to meet ourselves. And that is something that I'm committed to as a board member. I'm coming in with my own baggage, my own background, my own passions, but I'm committed to working with others who have also their own passions, baggage, and experiences, and finding that common ground. I think something that people are really hungry for in our community right now is a board that can align and agree on a decision. So I'm also committed to, once a decision is made by the board, we speak with one voice. That is a commitment that we have made as board members, and when a decision is made, we need to communicate to the community why we made that decision, what went into it, but that is our voice and that is our decision, so that we are not sowing seeds of one side versus another.
I think the biggest part of working collaboratively is keeping two things in mind, is that everybody on this stage and everybody already on the board has the top priority of doing right by kids. Whether they are our students, they are kids of the community, but we are all doing this for kids. And the second being coming to the table with presumed positive intent. When you keep those two things in mind and you work in public education, whether as a volunteer or as an employee, stepping back from the table until you figure it out, it's not an option. This is a volunteer role, but we are signing up to stick with it until we come to an agreement, or we at least agree to move forward together with respect and trust for each other as a board, as you know, Ms. Shattuck already kind of spoke to. But I think how to do it, you keep listening. You keep trying to understand different perspectives. You understand that a difference of opinion is not a personal attack, that you can disagree with an idea and not disagree with a person's humanity. And that sense of unity can bring you through a tough collaborative conversation. And I think listening to the comments on the stage tonight, I really don't think that there's a whole lot of difference in what we hope to bring to the board. I think there are slightly different lived experiences and backgrounds, and so with that in mind, I do believe that the board is in a place to have a lot of really positive collaboration moving forward, as opposed to divisive collaboration.
One of the benefits of going last is that all of my notes have already been spoken to. But yes, I will agree with my colleagues up here that collaboration has to start with recognizing the goodwill of everyone who is volunteering their days and sometimes into the wee hours of the following morning, if any current or recent board meetings are indicative of that. And that working side by side does not mean agreeing, and disagreement does not mean that we are fundamentally at odds with our commitment to the district. I keep hearing time and again, so what is going on with the board? Why are there these factions? I am not on the board, I can't speak to any of that, but I will say that I have had the opportunity to meet with people currently serving. I've coached with them, I've worked with them at SLU. I have spent hours with them, with our kids and in the neighborhood. And regardless of how we interact with the district as individuals, or where our kids are in the district, or how long we've lived here, right? Every single one of us is committed to kids and teachers. And when that's the case, I think that we can find solutions that may not, as Ms. Shattuck said, once we have deliberated and brought our own expertise and experience to those deliberations, to bring that decision to the community as one voice and to be transparent and accountable to the decisions that are made.
Yeah.
It's important for school board members to be visible and personally connected to our schools. If elected, how do you see yourself connecting with students, teachers, and staff in our community? How do you plan to incorporate the voices of students and families into decision-making processes? Dr. Colvin will begin with you.
So one of my favorite recent events was our State of the District, because it addressed one of my own frustrations as a community member prior to being on the board, which was that some of our events felt more scripted, more we'll tell you what you want to hear, but not as much of a conversation. And the State of the District, although not not everyone was there to be able to participate, to experience it, so bear with me. It was a nice small group. There were tables that people could come up to that represented the committees and the strategic plan. People could learn about some of the things that were happening, both from board members or committee members, as well as administrative team members. I do wish we also had principals, because people had questions for them that we couldn't always address. But they could come ask us questions. We could hear the questions, understand a little more of concerns, ask questions back to then say, like, so, you know, where does this come from, or can I ask some more clarifying information? Sometimes we could find someone with the answer right there at our table or another table. The other thing we could do is highlight some of the work we were doing even on a small level, which doesn't always rise to the level of a board meeting. So, for example, my committee could highlight how we gave feedback to make absence reporting easier on parents, because the morning your kid is sick is always nuts. And we were able to share that and implement it and then share it with the community. So that's really one of the plays I would like to connect about more, is in informal ways with the resources at hand to be able to hear and also share information with the community.
I'm really fortunate to have a kid both at the high school and the ECC, because I kind of get to see the full spectrum of events and get to be in a lot of different buildings, which is wonderful. The events at the high school are very different from the events at the ECC, as you can imagine, but all of them are incredibly valuable and such an opportunity to see how our community members are showing up, how our students are showing up. I'm committed to continuing to attend those events, not only because I'm a board member, but also because I love them and they bring me joy, and being in our schools are what fires me up and why I'm sitting here today. And I think that what we have to think about with community members and community voices is, what voices are we not hearing? What voices are underrepresented? Even right now, this is during dinner time on a school night, and it was very hard for people to attend. And like I said, my own kid is actually at childcare at the Community Unity Center, but I know that's a consistent issue with board meetings and our community conversations, is the timing and the lack of availability for childcare. So looking for community partnerships to help with that would allow us to hear more diverse voices and interact with different community members. I think we can also look at opportunities to host events at different times and on different days. I also got to go to that event, and it was a Saturday morning, which was sometimes a little bit easier for families to make it to. There was coffee, there was, I think, maybe bagels, and that was an opportunity for people who aren't able to make school nights due to sports schedules, due to childcare, could go to that event. And I know that we are really thinking about how we outreach to community members, but we need to continue to grow that and make sure that we're considering those voices.
So I also have kids, 2 kids in the district. This year, I am so grateful that they are in the same building as far as pickup and drop-off times go. But it has been wonderful having 2 kiddos in 2 different buildings, for having that breadth of insight into what is happening in our educational spaces in the district. Volunteering to read in classrooms, and chaperone field trips, and coach kids' sports, and try to find ways to connect with parents outside of the traditional classroom or school environment, is something that my husband and I do all the time, and it's really important to us to help maintain that sense of community and collaboration with our kids' teachers in the classroom. As far as participating or collaborating with staff, I, as an educator, routinely have sent communications, calls, emails to my kids' teachers checking in, because I know that public education is a hard space and we very rarely as public educators give or receive enough positive recognition for how hard the work is. And a lot of the feedback that I have gotten from classroom teachers over the years is what contributed to my running for school board, because I think we have teachers that want to be able to share their voices in more meaningful, trusting, sometimes vulnerable ways. And I think that giving them those direct opportunities to do that is important, and I will continue to do that whether I'm on the board or not. I think then ensuring that we are asking questions of each other as a board to ensure that we are not just bringing our own perspective to decision making, but encouraging each other with those hard questions of, but how does that impact staff? But how does that impact our students? But how does that impact our families? So that we, again, are ensuring that all voices are not only heard, but recognized and incorporated.
Yes, I will keep showing up in community, regardless of whether I'm on the board. The best part about being in a small district in a big city or big metro is that we are neighbors. We run into each other everywhere. Aldi, or the park, or soccer games, just a plug to the girls' soccer team who's playing tomorrow night, and also the boys' baseball team. Showing up as neighbors is how I will serve as a board member. Also, being a board member is a lot of responsibility, and one could serve without having to show up anywhere. I don't know if that is an approach that any of us would take, but it's not just inviting people into spaces that we would coordinate. It's showing up out where you are, where your kids are playing. Maybe you don't have kids in the district. Maybe your kids are graduated, or you send them to a parochial school, or you don't have kids. And you are still a community member. And I think that we've done a lot. Shout out to Ed Rich for the tremendous work he's done in increasing and addressing communication across the district, not only to people with kids in the district, but to others as well. But we can do more than invite people into our spaces. We can come to your space. Okay, I won't go. I was going to nerd out for a second and do some etymology about the word community, but I won't do that now. I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, I think as it relates to connecting with students and teachers, our district does a really good job, I feel like, with this, and our current school board as well. If you go to any MRH event, you're bound to see multiple school board members present. In our district, we do the roundtables, and Dr. Jameson does the community conversations. And I appreciate that they're about a variety of topics, because stakeholders are going to have different things that are important to them. And so the other thing I appreciate about that is that sometimes it's in person, sometimes it's through Zoom, because it's not always going to be somebody's preferred modality to go in person. And so just like our other candidate said, I plan to participate fully, whether I'm on the board or not, and attend events and communicate with community members. But I do think our district this is an area of strength for us.
Awesome, thank you so much. So, at recent board meetings, we've seen many of our critical support staff voice their concerns. If elected, what steps would you take to address those concerns or similar issues that are brought up by the community? Starting with Ms. Shattuck.
Yes. I have been at the past several board meetings where educational support professionals have spoken and have been deeply moved by the stories that they've shared. They are the heart of our buildings. They are keeping us running, and I have the pleasure to interact with so many of them on a regular basis. It is vital that we keep them here and that we support them. I can share a personal story. We had several bus drivers throughout the year last year, which was very challenging. Our original bus driver moved to another district, and then we had a substitute bus driver, and sometimes they were very early, sometimes they were very late. There was a lot of unpredictability, and now we've been fortunate enough to have Mr. Nat as our bus driver, who has been phenomenal. My kid, he knows my kids' names. He knows where my house is, so that if we're running late and we have to run down the sidewalk, he will stop and get us. And it just reinforced to me how valuable those relationships are and how important it is that we protect them. So I fully support our educational support professionals unionizing. I also fully believe that they should be paid a living wage, and my commitment is to doing what we can to figure out how we can support them in the way that they need and the way that they request, so that they can stay in our district and continue to bring joy and focus on our students.
I think the short answer is to ask our district leadership, specifically in the business office, for models that would include the living wage for our support staff in future financial or budget spending. We talk about APR. Part of APR is attendance. Who takes our attendance data? Our attendance secretaries. We talk about having innovative programs. They don't mean anything if our bus drivers don't get our students to school. We talk about innovative learning spaces. Doesn't really matter if the trash is overflowing and the classroom is dirty. Kids are going to be distracted by it. We need to have janitorial staff that make a living wage. When we constantly have staff turnover because those individuals don't make a living wage, that impacts the safety of our schools as well. When you have frontline workers who are working in front offices at the doors, supporting students at extracurricular activities, when they are new to the job and they are not entirely sure how to do it at the best possible level, our students' safety suffers, our learning environments suffer. So again, how do you address that support? We ask for models and budgets to incorporate it for the future so that we can try to keep those individuals in our community and in our schools.
If you have kids in the district right now, the front porch of the district on a day-to-day basis is probably a crossing guard or a bus driver or a front office staff member. These are the people who set the tone for the rest of the day. If you are like me and you are dropping your kids off at 8:28 to get to their class before the bell at 8:30, it can be chaotic. But these are the people who set the tone. I have been so moved in recent board meetings to hear people who feel such love for our district that they will drive half an hour each way to show up to work because they can't afford to live in Maplewood or Richmond Heights, who feel disempowered in many spaces, but who love our kids so much that they will show up and do their job and welcome our kids and love on our kids every single day. I think the least we can do as a board is to listen, hear them, trust them, and then work out what is possible. We've said before tonight that expenditures are already outpacing revenue. And going back to what Ms. Shattuck said a while ago, that budgets are moral documents. As a community, we're going to have to decide whether or not paying our educational support staff, and not just salary, but total compensation, thinking about the cost of insurance today and how that cuts into take-home pay, has to be part of the deliberation as well. So listening, believing, and trusting each other, and especially those who are with our kids every single day.
Hearing the stories from our support staff during the open comment section of the board meetings has been heartbreaking. Our support staff are the backbone of our district. They have made great sacrifices to work here. And when you hear that they're holding multiple jobs just to pay rent, it is heartbreaking. I think that we need to make this a priority. We need to retain our staff. We've all come to the consensus that obviously staff turnover is not good for our students. It's not good for our district. And I think this needs to be a priority. Whether we run the models or whatever it might look like, I think this definitely needs to be a priority.
So thankfully, I can say that Dr. Jameson and her team is already working on this and working on the models and the research to better understand where we compare to other districts, how we compare to a living wage, because it is very eye-opening to hear public comments and hear the individual stories of how our policies and our budgetary priorities affect individuals in the district. And so I'm glad that the educational support personnel have brought the concerns to our attention, and they then now as a district we need to better get the information we need to make a decision and understand the implications it will have on our budget, because unfortunately that is part of what the board has to consider. So we have more acutely looked at bus drivers because there were some situations already presenting where we were seeing the disparities across drivers and districts and sort of the market forces at work. So that got a little earlier attention, and now the focus is going to be more broad so that we can really as a board understand it and try to address it sooner than later.
Thank you. Before we get into our last pre-written question, we would request that anyone who has a written question, please hold it up to be collected by a PAL member so it's very clear that you'd like yours to be submitted. For our final pre-written question, there is increasing pushback against the overuse of technology or the use of AI tools in classrooms. What is your opinion on how technology is used in school and the balance of time spent learning on screens? We'll begin with Dr. Reed.
So I think my biggest, issue with technology is actually one of equity and equitable access. Like, I know that my children on AMI days, they don't have a device to bring home, but all of the assignments are online. My children have homework where they're supposed to provide, create typed drafts. Specific homework assignment guidelines say no handwritten materials. It is expected that there is a device at home, that there is a printer at home, and I know that not all of our families in the district have that. Not all of the families in our district are going to be in a space where our parents, our families, our support structures for students are going to be able to assist our youngest students when accessing some of those higher level tools, or make sure that they have the skills to use those higher level tools. So I think that there is amazing capacity to expand learning through technology because of the amount of information that is available. And students can create very innovative products, demonstrations of their learning when they are allowed to use technology in conjunction with physical materials. However, as a district, I do think that we still have work that we can do in ensuring that all of our students have access to that ultimate potential.
It's a great question. I'm encouraged that the board has been looking at AI policy directly, both for in-class and for teachers as well. Those policies, I think with every technological innovation, our policies are lagging behind practice. And so just being able to take a beat and think about what our policies will be with intention moving forward. If we tether our curriculum to hardware, absolutely we have to think about equity with access. And I've been really encouraged by the district's commitment to providing hardware to each student regardless of personal circumstance. So the K-8 iPad program, I've heard has been a really great success. My kids in the high school are really looking forward to their MacBooks, whatever is coming. As we move to being, I told my junior that she probably wouldn't see one, but moving to being an in-house or a total Apple shop, as they say, to help with things like making sure that kids are on their devices to learn and not to shop or whatever. I think those are all good directions if we're committed to, again, tethering curriculum to hardware. But I would also love to see MRH be a leader in our region in unplugging and providing intentionally unplugged spaces, not just Adventure Club or Seated Table, those kinds of things. I was talking with a mom recently in the district who wants to revive the lock-in, where we take away all of the kids' devices and make them talk to each other for a weekend. I love that idea. And thinking intentionally about how what kinds of values we are instilling in our kids when we unplug and talk to each other face to face, even if it's uncomfortable.
I think technology in the classroom is kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, certainly it has granted us access to things we didn't have before. When I was in school, which was eons ago, if you wanted to learn about Germany, the best you had was an encyclopedia and hope that there were a couple pictures in there. Now you can do a virtual tour right from your seat in your classroom. So it has brought about a lot of access to things that we didn't have before. The other thing that I think it does well is that you can have 10 students working on the same thing, but be at different places, based on ability or what have you. And so it really accommodates students at different levels. That being said, excessive screen use, we know, does cause a decrease in attention span. It also causes deficits in the acquisition of executive functioning skills. We also know that, of course, if screens aren't used appropriately or if we're not really on top of it, it can be a distraction in the classroom. So I think that technology and AI, it has its place, but I think we need to use it with some degree of caution because there are consequences to using excessive technology in the classroom.
I echo the same excitement about what technology can give us and reservations about how it removes us from our peers and from society. I work in healthcare, and so we are very technology rich to a fault, particularly during COVID, where I was virtual for a long time and even distanced from my peers physically in the office. So, I felt that. I think on the AI side, we're delving into AI at SSM, and I had to learn where I could use it as a time saver and where it was not effective, and I needed the support system to do that. So I think when we think about AI within the district, we need to provide those resources to first learn, but then to question, then to adapt, and then to decide really what are the best uses, but what are the uses we might not see as valuable, but where are the time savers? So for example, I can write certain letters that are a lot faster thanks to AI than me coming up with some of the content myself, as long as I do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize patient privacy, for example. And then on the tech side, I really want to hear from the teachers on where they think it's most valuable to them, where it's saving them time, where it's helping them close gaps, where it's helping them manage a classroom, but also where they have hesitations, for example, where they might not see students doing their own work, and what do they need as the safeguards against that, and where they might need some time to break from technology to build relationships within our communities and schools.
So I mentioned earlier that I lead a team of instructional designers. I don't think I mentioned I work at a tech company, and we are a digital analytics platform which has now rebranded as AI Native Analytics. So I work in an AI company now, which is new to me. And the reality is that AI is here, technology is here, and our job is to teach kids how to use it effectively, safely, and view it not as a replacement for human interaction. So there has to be a fine balance, but I think we do ourselves a disservice when we approach the conversation with too much fear. There's a lot of opportunity for our students, and that's the world that they're going to be going into. It's not the world that I was in. I had textbooks, but now when I'm helping my oldest daughter with school, it's all in Canvas. Canvas? Canvas. I think it's Canvas, not Canva. That's the editing software. And it's difficult to navigate. It's really hard for me, and I work in tech, and so I echo the concerns about the equity concerns and families struggling to help their students with work at home, and that it's not a replacement for human interaction. I was a little apprehensive about the cell phone ban at the high school, and my daughter loves it and says that they have great conversations at lunch. And I don't hear from her during the day, so if I text her, I know I won't hear from her until the end of the day because I know that policy is being enforced, and that's been wonderful. We went on a recent vacation with a surprise blackout, and my daughter said, "Wow, it's so nice that I can't watch TikTok. It's so nice that I can't text my friends." So while we have to be really careful to not be too scared of technology and make sure that we are using it to empower our students and empower our teachers and rolling that out in a way that they can adopt it, and we're managing data privacy concerns, we also have to find that balance and ensure that we still maintain that human face-to-face focus and interaction.
All right, thank you so much, candidates, for sharing your thoughts on each of the questions and topics. At this time, we would like to switch to questions from our audience. We will also have the sample ballot on the projector as well to keep the audience reminded of what seats are available.
Our first audience submitted question is, to what extent are you willing to push back against state or federal policy in order to protect students and staff? We can begin, sorry, it was Dr. Lindsay, I believe. Yes. Is that, am I right? Yes, Dr. Lindsay.
This is, to what extent are we willing to push back against state and federal policy to protect students? Yes. The safety of our students is the most important thing, all students. It is heartbreaking that so many of our students feel personally vulnerable to state policies and laws, our teachers as well. I think that the responsibility of the board is to be a shield to the extent that it's possible so that educators and students can thrive as learners and teachers. I think we also have to be strategic in how we do that so that we don't invite additional scrutiny to our district and inadvertently put students at risk. I think that takes a collective action that has to be in partnership not only with other board members, but with, and there's a question about Dr. Jameson earlier on that I completely glossed over. I think she's done an extraordinary job of listening to students, listening to families, protecting families in the ways that she's been able to. In a moment in time when she came on board, when people were leaving education in droves because they were exhausted, but she found ways to take our values and our commitments and implement them in a way that has protected the most vulnerable. Also the most, I don't want to cast students who might be at risk as being only victims, right? These vital parts of our community worth protecting as we would any child, any teacher.
I think the question was, how far are we willing to push it? And the short answer is pretty far. I read a study not too long ago by Tulane University about the voucher system specifically. They went into 11 states that did the voucher program and found that 90% of the students that were receiving the voucher were students that were already enrolled in private school. So they already had access to the funding to attend private school. So those resources are being pulled away from the public school, potentially to students that don't have the same socioeconomic advantage. And so it really becomes an issue of equity. And so I think when we talk about these policies, sometimes we kind of gloss over the fact that these are causing serious impact on our students and on our communities as it relates to equity and as it relates to students being included in things. And so the short answer is I'm willing to push very far on this topic.
So when I think about this question, I think, you get back to the answer we give a lot, which is trying to find the balance. Because I am frustrated with where policies are. I'm frustrated with some of the politics that affect our students at the state and federal level. And our community is frustrated, and we have a commonality in that. And so I do, as a community, want to find ways that we can advocate together, collectively, with our representatives in our legislatures. And really try to highlight to them the impact of their decision making. Then on the flip side, I have to think about, how do we creatively support our students, but still recognize that as a board, we're also bound to legal parameters. And so sometimes we have to think about that as that we're going to bump up against some of the things that we are not in a position to go as far as emotionally we would want to if that puts our district at risk of litigation, which is, as a financial steward, not something that we would want to do. So it's always going to be hard to figure out where that balance is in serving our students. But yes, I think our district has been very creative at thinking about ways we can support our students as a community. And across the United States, we've heard examples of this as well, where the community just steps up and says, we're tired of this, and individually we're going to make an impact within our community as we slowly work towards change with advocacy and other levers that we can pull.
I think it fills me with a lot of hope that when this question was asked, I had an idea of what everyone on this stage would say. And I've seen other community members mention this, and it's something that I feel deeply, is that we all care about equity, we all care about supporting our students, and we're not arguing over we should no longer have bathrooms for any sex or gender. We're not arguing about banned books. We're up here deciding how we're going to advocate more. And I think that's such a strength of our district, and it's amazing that we can even have this conversation. I am committed to upholding those board policies that we have in place already around equity and inclusion and supporting our LGBTQIA students. I would echo what Christy said, which is pretty far, and my commitment runs really deep to supporting our students and supporting our teachers in the classroom, who are the ones on the ground and having to deal with some of those things in their classroom and the impact and fear that that can generate when those policies are being passed at the state and federal level. I think one thing that we can do is continue to advocate and organize around with other districts and with other community members and with our fellow board members. Not every community member has the ability to go to Jeff City, but that is something that the board can do, and the board can advocate for policy. And it's something that I would like to see us organize more as a community around.
So I echo my fellow candidates in the answer being pretty far, but not setting our district up for litigation that is going to set us back as a community or as a school district. However, I've spent 17 years doing what I call navigating the gray area for families. I've spent 17 years working with at-risk students, at-risk families, when the norm, the status quo, the standard has failed them, or they feel like it has failed them. And finding ways to get creative in that gray space between what is actually written in the statute, what is actually written in the policy, in the board administrative procedure, and taking all of that and getting creative with how to meet the needs of students and families. And so sometimes the answer is pushing back and taking a stand. And sometimes the answer is really reading the logistics and figuring it out a different way. Sometimes there's no other way to say, I stand by LGBTQ plus students. But if there is a policy or an aversion to gender-neutral bathrooms, okay, we just have bathrooms. We have bathrooms that are open because they are more safe for students, because they are easier to supervise. They're putting them into airports. We do not have transgender or gender neutral bathrooms, we have safer bathrooms. It is accomplishing the same goal that we are able to make our students feel included, like they belong and like they are valued, but we are not setting ourselves up for litigation. So I think sometimes it's about pushing back and sometimes it's about thinking about the solution differently.
Amazing. Thank you, candidates. So the board's role is governance, not management. What does governance mean to you guys?
Well, I read something not too long ago that says the board's role is to pick the destination and the superintendent and leadership's role is to pick the path to get there. And that's how I kind of view governance. It's really a step back, looking at the broader picture, where the superintendent and the leadership's role is more those day-to-day operations and figuring out how we're going to get to the end goal. And so I think looking at it like that, it takes a team approach and a collaboration to get to where we want to be, but that's kind of the delineation I make between the two roles.
As a board member, we are an elected official, and so I see that as an important aspect of how we approach governance. We get information. Often our primary source is through administrative channels, so we take that information, but then we also look at it in the context of the schools and of the feedback we're getting from the community, the concerns we're hearing both from parents and from others within the community. And so I think of the board's role as one of listening, of thinking about the impact of things, but also of questioning and thinking about, sometimes I went to an event recently where someone said, if we have too many educators on the board, sometimes we don't think like people who aren't educators. And so they liked the diversity of the board. They had educators, but they also had non-educators, as opposed to another that was heavy on the educators. And so they said that we really liked that perspective so different people could ask different questions from a governance role. And so I like to think of that and how we can together approach governance and to serve our community and those that voted us into our position.
I'd echo a lot of that. I view governance as oversight. I view my role that I currently serve in professionally as a lot of governance, and if I step into overseeing every intricate detail of the way that my employees do the work that I've asked them to do, then that steps into management and micromanagement. The best and most functional relationship that we can have as a board is hearing community voices, hearing parent voices, student voices, teacher and support professional voices, and being able to have that oversight and that big picture view as we're examining things. We're not responsible for the day-to-day, but we are responsible for ensuring that the day-to-day rolls up into those policies that we've set, those guidelines that we've set, and those commitments that we've agreed to as a board. So that is where I view the distinction between governance and maintenance. It is ensuring that those decisions are happening and they're enacted and holding the district accountable for that without getting too into the weeds in the day-to-day when it's not required.
So before filing as a candidate, I asked one of my mentors, who happens to also be in a district leadership position and be on a board in his home district. And I asked him, what is your best piece of advice? And he said, when you already work within the system, your job is to ask informed questions, not make informed statements to your district. And I think that also really gets at the heart of what is the role of governance, that as a board, especially with diverse backgrounds not in education, that the role is to ask the questions for the purpose of accountability. Can you explain to me why this is being done this way? Can you explain to us how this is going to help us accomplish the specific goal in our strategic plan? Have you considered, so to Ms. Shattuck's point about not getting into the thickets, I think asking the questions about how did we get here and making sure that there is enough information presented so that the board can be informed, but not necessarily taking that information and shifting the direction and therefore going from a governance to a managerial position.
I'm going to add a coda to the previous question and then answer this one, which is that I appreciate my colleagues' attention and thinking about protecting the district from litigation. But I also think that we have to lead with moral courage on these issues. There was a time when law of the land was segregated schools, and I'm not likening anything. I just think that when it comes to standing up and protecting our kids, sometimes we have to be willing to open ourselves up for scrutiny if we believe as a body, not an individual, but as a body, that it's in the best interest of all students. And in response to this particular question, can you repeat the question? Governance, okay, yes. Sorry.
Management versus
okay,
governance.
And I have like 20 seconds. So yes, the Board of Education consists of 7 at-large members, right? We don't represent our city council or our ward. We represent every family, every neighbor, and what is best for the district, how to protect public schools at a time when public schools are under assault. So I would agree with my colleagues up here that collaborating, standing for your convictions, voting individually, not as a block, is a very important part of being part of a cohesive governance that represents all members, or all neighbors, sorry.
Thank you so much. For time purposes, we will ask 2 more audience-submitted questions, but I do want to let you all know that even if your question is not asked publicly tonight, we are sending all questions to each of the candidates so they may respond in their own time on their own platform. So they will hear all of your questions, even if they do not respond tonight. And we thank you so much. These are amazing questions. The next one is, what classes or programs that MRH does not have should be on the roadmap to add in the future? Dr. Colvin, if you want to start.
Well, can I say nursing? As a nurse, I probably should, but really I'm stalling. I think that's a really interesting question. What would be in my playground if I could? I think I would love to have limitless resources to dream big. I think one of the things I've noticed my kids encounter is the limit on AP classes, either in offerings in general or in availability because of scheduling. And so thinking at the high school level, which was where I'm at now, that's one of the areas where I do wish we could get a little more creative in supporting certain college-bound pathways where there's an interest in having some more advanced classes, but also partnering with community resources. We're in a large city, and so there's resources within the community college that we can also tap into. And so sometimes it's not only offering it here, but better pairing what's out there with our schedules and helping our students identify those resources so they can also choose to move in the direction they want to. I think having more resources towards supporting trades and figuring out what that looks like in our modern society, and recognizing that South Tech can take only so many of our students. So how can we also in-house support some of those resources would be some of the areas that I would think of, as well as a little more support on the ACT side.
I'm going to also answer this question as though I have unlimited funds and my dream wish list. And it's also things that I think that we should be examining and figuring out where we can create the opportunities to do these, since we don't now. One of those one of the classes that stands out the most to me in my mind is not math or science, but it was a home ec class, and we got to cook, and I still remember some of the recipes we made. It's the first time I tried meringue. It was disgusting. I never made it again, but I had the opportunity to learn some kitchen skills and some basic skills like that. Home ec is such an awesome program, and I'd love to see us talk about how to incorporate that. I'd also echo things like having additional trades classes. My school district had some great classes at the middle school, it seems, but I took a class where I learned how to wire an electrical outlet, and having opportunities to do hands-on things like that, like woodworking and electric. We have awesome partnerships with South Tech and with the community colleges, but it would be really exciting if we could incorporate more of that hands-on learning and that non-tech-based learning classes in our schools to give students those opportunities, because those skills help prepare them for the real world, especially our non-college bound kids. I'm also thinking about our AP programs, because I've heard about that as well, but also our gifted program. I've had some questions from the community about that, and that's something that I'd love to look into, is how we're serving our gifted kids, and especially our gifted kids who are also neurodivergent. So.
I want to approach this question not from what can we originate and house and be responsible for ourselves, but what partnerships can we develop with neighboring districts to open the doors to innovative things for our students. St. Louis is a region of silos and redundancy, but a lot of collaboration. There are professional learning networks for almost every role in public education, and every district sends their person that does that thing to collaborate on a regular basis. And so we're already collaborating with University City and Afton for sports. I would love to see us collaborate with other smaller districts for programming. There's CAPS, Center for Advanced Professional Studies, is a collaboration that exists in St. Louis. It is a program for high school students that they can go learn professional skills in a classroom setting with a teacher from one of a number of different school districts, and then have a placement in a real world business or a hospital to practice those skills. No one district can pull that off by themselves. I think it's not what do we originate, what do we start, but how do we start talking more? How do we collaborate more effectively so that, again, we're not just creating the wheel in our own little silo, while Brentwood is also doing that, and Clayton is doing that, and Webster is doing that. I think there's a lot of power in collaboration, and I would love to look at developing more partnerships as opposed to developing more classes.
I'm also going to come at this a little sideways. I think this year the ECC implemented 2 new curricula, so I'm sure that those teachers don't want any more innovation right now. Dr. Stansel, thank you. But the point, the question that or the way I'm thinking about this is that I think we start with hiring teachers who have expertise that is not represented. I've been encouraged by our commitment to the diversity hiring fair, recruiting excellent teachers who are bringing their own innovations into our schools. As an educator myself, I kind of bristle when someone tells me what I should teach. So, the board's job, I think, in this position would be to listen to educators. The last 2 years, we've retained 93 and 95% of our teachers. That's incredible, right? We are able to retain teachers, and those who are retiring, or those who are leaving, are retiring, or leaving the profession. So I think we keep on this trajectory. We keep hiring excellent teachers at all grade levels who are committed to teaching, who are thinking innovatively, and who can teach our kids in ways that we can't even imagine as board members.
I think, I'd have to piggyback off my colleagues here. The trades, I think I would advocate introducing some, because South Tech can only take so many students, and a lot of our students are college bound, but a lot of our students are career bound. And so I would advocate that we have more trade-based offerings. What kind of like what Ms. Shattuck said about the home ec class, I remember being in school and taking a shop class, and although I was terrible at it, there were a lot of little modules, and to this day, I still know how to make a paper towel holder. So those things stick with us, and I think like it's important. I mean, those skills, like even though, like I said, I don't necessarily use them all the time, they do stick with you, and they are important skills. They're life skills.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. So for the last question, what are 3 words that would define your goals for MRH as a board member, and how is that similar or different to words describing MRH right now? Starting with Ms. Shattuck.
Can you repeat the question one more time? The first part was 3 words, but...
Yes, okay. The second part is, how are those 3 words similar or different to words that describe MRH right now?
A tough on the spot question. I think my 3 words would be equity, collaboration, and support. I think that those align pretty well with what we're already doing as a district. We have an educational equity policy. We're extremely committed to equity, but I would love to see us consider the ways in which we are not viewing equity currently and be even more focused on that. My second word was collaboration, and that goes back to those relationships that we're building with the community and our fellow board members. I think we're doing a really good job as a district of moving towards more collaboration, but there is still divisiveness in our community. I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've seen it at our board meetings, and I think that a commitment to collaboration and hearing voices and hearing sides that you don't agree with is something that our district supports, but an area that we could do better. And then my last word was support. And that is just a commitment to supporting our students, supporting our teachers and educational support professionals, supporting our community members. Everyone has real concerns. Everyone's experiences are valid, and it is important that we are good listeners and good, that we have the ability to understand and support and provide that empathy as board members.
Okay, so this is hard because I really wanted to listen to your answer and not just think about my own. I think my 3 words are experience, culture, and collaboration. Experience, again, I think it is valuable to have a breadth of knowledge coming into the role. We don't currently have that on the board. I don't think that's a negative, but that is something that I have that I can bring. Culture, I think we have a common view of what we want for our district and what we believe we stand for. I think as a board we need to be able to have some conversations about, is the climate in all of our spaces conducive to letting that culture live the way that we want it to. And as far as collaboration, the only way that we are going to continue to move forward as a district and support our students is continuing to collaborate and finding new ways to do so. And again, I think that there's a lot of pockets of strong collaboration, and I think that there are some very small pockets, but present, where collaboration is not always effective and it is negatively impacting our climate and not always making everybody in every space feel like we can live what we say we want for ourselves and our students and our community.
I did my best to come up with 3 different words. So my 3 words would be learning, connection, and joy. Learning, I think, is important to distinguish from the gathering of information, right? We want our kids to be wise, to be building knowledge, skills, obviously, but to be curious and compassionate, and not just really good at finding answers to questions that they haven't asked themselves. Connection with each other, with teachers, with neighbors, with students. Connection across the schools is something I think we can work on. building those cultures of belonging that transfer from one school to the other. I think this is not just a sort of Pollyannish or kumbaya kind of thing. I'm really convinced this is a matter of urgency for the mental and emotional well-being of our kids, especially by the time they get to college. Just, you can tell when those kids have no connection. Like, they might be excellent students, but feel very isolated. And joy. I love this district. I think we all do. And there's a lot to celebrate. And I think the more we can lean into what brings us together, the more we can set the example for our kids of what it is to live in community.
I think the 3 words that I would say are teamwork, resilience, and access. I think teamwork, because ultimately, as we've seen even through this campaign, we are a community of very passionate individuals. We all love this district. We want what's best for our kids. We want what's best for the staff. And so I think there has been a lot of division, but I think we can come together and as a team find our common goal. So that's why I would say teamwork. Resilience, we all face setbacks, but I think we bounce back well as a community. And then access, I think all students should have access to a high quality education. And so I think those would be the 3 words that would best sum up my goals for the school board.
So I'm breaking the rules and saying common ground. I know it's not one word, but I think as a board, we really have to work towards common ground, recognizing that what makes us powerful is our difference in experience and approach. And so we have to work together to figure out where our common ground is. Sometimes that may appear as division, but it is still working towards a common goal. And I have seen our board members approach difficult decisions with professionalism, with commitment to the district, considering our students and considering how to help them have the best experience and education possible. I would say diversity. Our community is diverse. Our community prides itself in the diversity that it brings to the table. And I think despite outside threats to that, as we talked about earlier with the legislation, I think that's what makes us a remarkable place, and we are preparing our kids for really entering life prepared and whole and ready to really be good citizens of the world. And then creative. And so, we talked a little bit about when we hit certain barriers, how could we maybe solve problems given restrictions? Well, creativity is one way, and really thinking about how to innovate for our district. I think our central office and our teachers and our building administrators already do that. Our community supports it. Our community shares their own ideas. So I think that would be the other thing that we're doing well.
Thank you so much, and thank you all audience members for submitting your questions. It is important to hear from the MRH community, and we are so glad that you all came out tonight to have your opinions and your voices heard. Let's give a big round of applause to our board candidates for volunteering their time. We would also like to thank the MRH Board of Education, Mrs. Huffman, Mr. Rich, and Mrs. Norton for helping put on this event and to set up the technical aspects of tonight. Please, everyone, remember to vote on April 7th. Polls open at 6 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. Thank you so much for coming out.